Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. Today, everything you see is for sale. We're starting our weekend off right. To ask about any of the watches you see in this program, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. That's if you want to buy or trade or sell. Sell a watch. We're always looking to build inventory. One watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value paid, and we pay cash. Once again, if you wish to sell, buy, or trade, reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Great show today, starting off with three big pieces from Rolex. Now this is the redesigned second generation Rolex Deep Sea. You can see this model featuring the characteristic post-2018 Rolex crown between Swiss and made. Brings back everything we loved about the original 2008 Deep Sea, but it adds better ergonomics, a more handsome match between bracelet spacing and lug width, and then of course a watch that's a little bit shorter from end to end, so it's easier to wear. Now there's a lot to love here because this is Rolex's most technically ambitious production diver of all time. You can see first, material you don't often see on Rolex watches, a titanium case back, and then a ring lock system. You can see there's a plinth underneath the sapphire that's almost 6 millimeters thick, hence no Cyclops eye magnifier. Now that little plinth acts as sort of the base of a cylinder that starts just underneath the crystal and continues all the way through to the case back. So it really clenches together and increases its hermeticity as the depth increases. And this is a true dive watch, as Rolex will have tested it to 125% of its 3,900 meter depth rating before it leaves Geneva. A pleasing 120 click bezel, now with a 3-day power reserve, 70 hours if we're being precise, and still Rolex's best overall diving clasp. This one's designed to be adjusted while on the wrist, so you still have Glidelock, but there's a trap door built into the clasp, so you have the ability to make that 20 millimeter of adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, and you can do all of that while it's still on the wrist. And then of course, if you need more extension, there is the flip lock system, so you wind up with over 50 millimeters of total extension, and for those of us in the old colonies, 2 inches plus. A real impressive watch, maybe not a watch for a 16 centimeter circumference wrist like mine, though if I wanted to use it as a utility watch, it would make sense ergonomically from that standpoint. Although it's a little bit bold for a wrist of my size, I'd say if you want to wear it on a daily basis as opposed to using it for an athletic occasion or a party, you're probably going to want a wrist at least 17 centimeters circumference. But you can see across the wrist, it's a lot more compact than the previous Deep Sea, and I mean by millimeters on both sides. So a really good looking watch, handsome, substantial, and all the tech Rolex has to spec in the dive watch class. Now let's say you want a watch that's just as bold, maybe some more gold, and a little bit less mass, but just as much class. Well, this watch has all of that. Submariner, as you can see, previous generation. A lot to love about this first generation super case sub, starting with the fact that it is so thin. Let's show these two crystal to crystal real quick so you can actually see just how different they are in thickness. The Deep Sea is a veritable SSBN for your wrist, whereas the sub is more of a light and wieldy attack submarine. Throw it on your wrist. It's got Glidelock too. It works a little bit differently. This one's designed to be adjusted off the wrist because it doesn't have that cool trapdoor system. It's still 20 millimeters of adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, so you've got no problem if you want to use it for sizing or an all-out pull over a dive suit. It's a lot flatter, and you can see that quite easily. The watch is neither as broad across the wrist nor as thick in profile, and the timepiece really does wear quite well. Though these super case subs look like 42s on the wrist, they do still wear true to size at about 40 millimeters. The timepiece 300 meters water resistant with the same ceramic insert within its bezel, which is also 120 click. We may as well do a quick loom shot here since I've had two dive watches on in as many turns. Bringing back the sub. You can see there's not a whole lot to tell between the Sea Dweller and the Sub by Night. They are very, very similar. Of course, both of them, chronometers, anti-magnetic, shock resistant, highly water resistant, and in this case, extremely resistant to planned obsolescence, as the first date just would have bowed back in 1945 on the Jubilee bracelet, so named because 1945 was the 40th anniversary or Jubilee of the Rolex brand. Now, the Cyclops eye arrived in the early 1950s, but for the most part, the design of the oyster case, the integration with the Jubilee bracelet, the simple combination of 3 hands and a date, all of that endures into the present day in this 116234. comfortable at 36 millimeters, nice and low slung on the wrist, nowhere near the edge of my wrist. And you can see that both from over the top and down the barrel, nice and flat, easily sliding underneath the cuff. This is the Super Jubilee, so it has all solid center links and a very substantial clasp. So no concerns here about using this as a sports bracelet, and it actually vents better than the Oyster. And this also has the crown clasp, but the only clue is to the partition in the two halves of the bracelet being that 5-point coronet. A lot to love here. You can see that one of the nicest things about the Jubilee is that the individual link cross sections are small, so between the venting and the rather silky feel, it is a very luxurious experience on the wrist, even as the modern Jubilee is sporty enough that you could wear it for active lifestyles. Now, the watch is 100 meters water resistant. It's shock resistant thanks to a full balance bridge and a free sprung index. And this timepiece right here features a particularly memorable combination of Jubilee bracelet, stainless steel case, white gold fluted bezel, blue sunburst dial, applique, loomed white gold indices, and then you have the lovely roulette date where the odd days are going to be red and the even days are going to be black. A lovely historical feature on Rolex watches. It harks back to a day when Rolex watches routinely used a little bit more color than in the modern era. And this is a timepiece, of course, that is the same movement inside as the Submariner you just saw, so it is just as accurate, just as tough, just as resilient. Let's take a look at a couple of aggressive sports chronographs, starting with this model that came out in 250 pieces in media blasted titanium in 2020. This, of course, is the Zenith Defy El Primero 21, and you can see this one is for Land Rover, part of a series of Land Rover and Range Rover collaborations dating back to 2016. It recalls the fact that the original Range Rover and the original El Primero debuted almost simultaneously at the turn of the 1970s. Now, the watch right here is actually my favorite version of the Defy El Primero 21 because I like the solid dial. The matte dial that matches the blasted titanium of the case is perfect for me. I don't like the look of the oversized skeleton dial. I don't think it's going to age as well as solid dial watches. The problem is most of these Defy El Primero 21s do feature the skeleton dial. So not only is this a rare solid dial, but it's the best solid dial available on the Defy El Primero 21. A few shocks of orange. You can see there's a power reserve gauge up at 12 o'clock for the 50-minute chronograph power reserve. It is a 360,000 vibration per hour escapement for the Foudroyant chronograph, which spreads 1 second over 100 clicks around the dial. And then we've got a separate automatic winding movement that powers the watch itself. That has a 50-hour power reserve. The chronograph is 50 minutes. You actually wind manually the chronograph, and you can manually wind or automatically wind the watch itself. And if you're wondering, can the watch and the chronograph run separately if the other is inactive? Absolutely. Another feature that's important to note, the watch was the first El Primero to feature hacking seconds, and you can see the seconds have stopped, but because the chronograph is an independent movement with its own escapement, drivetrain, and mainspring barrel inside the case, when you hack the movement, you don't actually hack the chronograph. It's also a very vocal watch with a persistent dull rattle that I absolutely adore. If you love the heartbeat of a mechanical watch, this one's even better because it gives you that double step cadence of the Foudroyant as well as the 10 beat per second of the El Primero. Turn it over, you can't see a whole lot inside the caliber 9004, but there's a lot to love. It's a COSC chronometer. You can just make out that the escapement for the El Primero side of things is made of silicon and unlubricated for long-wearing durability and precision. And then if you look closely, you can see that there are actually two escapements in there. There's the one operating at 360,000 vibrations per hour, and then there's the one operating at 36,000 vibrations per hour. All of this is 100 meters water resistant, so you throw it on the wrist and, this watch can pretty much stay with you full time. It's got a lovely combination of textile and rubber about its strap, again with a few well-chosen orange accents. It's a little bit understated by the standards of the Defy El Primero 21, and I like that. Being water resistant, automatic winding, a sports chronograph, and of course, fairly well loomed, this is a fine all-arounder that wears a little bit more mature than a standard Defy El Primero 21. As a result, this is far and away my favorite, and the auto association, which I happen to love as a car guy, endears it to me further. Let's take a look at a watch we rarely see from a brand we rarely feature on this show, Breguet. This model debuted back in 2006. It is the 5827BA. It is the marine chronograph, mechanically just about identical to a Type 21 or a Type 20. This is a timepiece that features a La Manna caliber doing business as Breguet 583Q, and what really sets it apart here is you've got a case that's 120 meters water resistant, you have a dial that is loomed, it is a sports watch, automatic winding, you can see that there's real rose-lathe guilloche on the dial. You see a guilloche main, that means it is hand guilloche. It is done by a guillocheur using a rose lathe, an old 19th century engine that he programs with cams to create a pattern on the solid gold dial, and this dial is solid gold. So not just real guilloche, but on a solid gold blank. It's then galvanized to the silver white that you see. The hands, as well as the numerals, are fired steel, and the numerals are applique. You can see that the watch features chronograph minutes radially, so you have your chronograph seconds at center, and then instead of a little register for chronograph minutes, you have this hand that makes one circuit around the dial per hour. So most chronographs only feature a 30-minute register. This gives you a full 60 minutes. Even better, just like the Type 20s, this one is a flyback chronograph that you can reset and restart with a single push of the trigger. The watch, again, very water resistant, extensively handmade. You can see that the lugs are welded on. The case blank is cold rolled and then hand finished to create this lovely striation, this flank coining. There's a double dome to the bezel, and then as you can see, there's a wave motif in the chronograph pushers. You'll see it again in the form of the buckle, and the buckle is a lovely and opulent thing. You can see all in yellow gold to match. Note the combination of satin and polish right there, and it features a pincer system in the buckle to better hold and retain this sports watch, which is large and heavy. You can see that the strap is fixed to the case using screws and bars. Again, more expensive to do it that way than with spring bars, but also more secure. Based on the Lemania 1350 movement here, you can see the Breguet 583Q, which means it is a calendar 583. You can also appreciate the fact that the rotor itself has the same type of rose lathe guilloche as the dial, so you have a lovely design parallelism there, and this almost seashell-like pattern that's engraved into the rotor. The chronograph is nicely made, automatic winding, quick set date, cam lateral clutch for a very tough operation and durability. Beats away at 4 hertz, 48-hour power reserve, built by Lemania expressly for Breguet. And these days, Lemania is known as manufacturer Breguet, so effectively this is now an in-house caliber chronograph, as the two have been joined together permanently. Breguet, the flagship brand of the Swatch Group, comparable with the best of anything out there, and this watch, thanks to the Lemania movement base, is even a little bit tougher than the competition from the likes of Lange, Vacheron, and Patek. A very cool sports chronograph. Now here we have a special edition with an endearing combination of colors, materials, tones, and textures. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph. This is the 26471 SR, combination of steel and rose gold. The 26471 is considered to be a special edition that was reserved for boutique and premier retailers. You can appreciate that this watch has never been polished, as the case, the bezel, every facet is razor sharp, and you can always see it's self-evident when a watch such as this has not been polished. It looks sharp enough to draw blood. It also looks sharp in a metaphorical sense. As you can see, the timepiece is very striking with its silver case and steel, its rose gold accents, the fully expressed black bezel gasket, and the use of polished stainless steel bolts inside the bezel with the vertical striation, the polish on the side, and the octagonal form that was inspired by a vintage diving helmet that persuaded Gerald Genta to draw the first Royal Oak in 1972. And of course, in 1992, Emmanuel Guet proposed an anniversary model to play up the essential elements of the Royal Oak while becoming more aggressive and contemporary. And so for 1993, the Royal Oak Offshore debuted as an all-out sports watch in the tradition of the Genta, although Genta himself did not like it. He thought it was a perversion of his design, but that just proves that in time, the revolutionary always becomes the establishment. Now, the watch is also nicely made with ceramic collar for the crown, ceramic pushers, and you can see that there's hairline beveling on the edge of the crown guards, as well as a lovely differential between satin finish and polish on the lip of the chronograph pushers. Literally no attention to detail has been spared. Polished rose gold chapter rings for the registers, which feature a countersunk center and then concentric pattern outboard, a rose gold frame for the date, and then inside a 50 to 55 hour power reserve courtesy of Audemars Piguet, manufactured caliber 3126 with a Dubois de Praz 3840 vertical clutch module. It's a thick, tough, accurate movement with a free sprung balance and a full balance bridge with a Gyromax style free sprung balance architecture. Bidirectional winding with a 22 karat mass featuring the coats of arms of the Audemars and Piguet family, reminding you that AP is still owned and run by the founding families. A truly special piece, 42 millimeters and 100 meters water resistant, loomed and automatic winding. Throw it on the AP diver style strap, and you're going to find that this is a watch you can take anywhere. Swim with it, party with it, take it into the boardroom, the bedroom, the restaurant. This watch goes everywhere you do. As an Audemars Piguet, it comes from one of the Holy Trinity brands, but it's also a type of audacity that frankly Patek and Vacheron infrequently visit. This is a watch that is boldly Audemars Piguet and shows what AP really does and is, that sets it apart from the conservatism, the sometimes hidebound conservatism of, say, Lange, Vacheron, and Patek. Let's do a loom shot. I mentioned this is a full-feature sports watch, and that holds up. The Luminova is absolutely blazing. This is a watch for the day or the night, always right. And jumping back to 2013, Omega hit gold, striking the precious metal, metaphorically speaking, with ceramic. Ceramic was gold in 2013, and the dark side of the moon was a revelation. 44.25 millimeters, though mostly of ceramic and sapphire in this feather light. The timepiece was stark dark, and let Omega realize for at least one model year what it was like to be Rolex, with people lining up around the corner to get on wait lists and aftermarket markups for the watch that sometimes doubled its price. So this is a watch that was a rock star then and remains one now. Technically part of the Moonwatch collection, it has that classical lyre-style lug case with the asymmetry introduced in 1964 on the Speedmaster Professional, so there's a little bit of sheer guard for the crown and the pushers. The dial, as you can see from the stamped zirconium oxide, is made of ceramic, just like the case. The idea being that it has the luster and the durability, the resistance to oxidation and tarnish of enamel, but it doesn't have the fragility or cost of enamel. Now, the case is also ceramic, and what I adore here is that you have the same satin finish and polish that you would get on a metal Moonwatch. Here it's executed with diamond-tipped milling tools, speaking to the industrial might of the Swatch Group that can finish a watch like this. Now, the watch features white gold hands and indices, and then it has a wonderful time zone feature you can use. Note the watch is still keeping time and the chronograph's still running. I can adjust my local time as I travel east or west. I can drive the date in both directions. Of course, if I want to, there's hacking or stop seconds. And then on the dial, you can see it looks like a twin register, but there's actually a mono counter at 3 o'clock. So you have your chronograph minutes and chronograph hours on one register, which keeps the dial clean, but gives you that hours and minutes register for practicality. Flip it all over. It's a coaxial, it's a chronometer, it's a chronograph. You can see that this watch features a column wheel because it's visible through the skeletonized bridge. So the feel, the action is very crisp and positive. It also has a vertical clutch, so when the chronograph starts, it never jumps or staggers, and you can leave the chronograph running full time with no additional wear or tear on the movement. Coaxial, you better believe, and you can actually see the coaxial escapement underneath the balance bridge if you use a loop. The 60-hour reserve is provided by 2 mainspring barrels, so unlike, say, a single barrel movement, you don't have the problem of giant balance amplitude drop-offs after 24 and 48 hours. The timepiece does feature a silicone hairspring. It is effectively amagnetic, very resilient. So between its almost complete immunity to scratches, its highly shock-resistant movement architecture, and its resilience to magnetism, this is an all-the-time watch if you've got the panache to wear something this stark. And as you can see on my wrist, it does fit. It's not broad across the wrist, even though undoubtedly it is thick. I could recommend it for a 14-centimeter circumference wrist, but just keep in mind it's probably not going to fit underneath most cuffs. All the same, this isn't a watch to disappear underneath a sleeve. This is a watch that begs to be seen. Let's take a look at 2 from Moser. Now, both of these watches feature precious metal cases, unique complications designed by Andreas Streller, and 7-day rated, 9-day actual power reserves. Let's start with this one right here. Launched for 2019, made in 50 pieces. This is the Endeavour Perpetual Moon concept of venturing. Now, it's a perpetual moon because it has a moon phase with an adjustment interval of once every 1,027 years. It was designed for Moser by Andreas Streller, who is an AHCI luminary and a rock star independent in his own right. He specializes in deceptively simple-looking complications. And you can see there's a small stub hand at the center underneath the primary hands that lets you know whether it's day or night, so you can set the moon phase correctly. The watch features a concept dial, as Moser calls it, which means completely unadorned. No text text, no indices, nothing. As simple as bare as it gets, and because it's not branded, there's no mistaking that this is Moser. It's a little bit of a contradiction in terms, but it's absolutely true. Now, the dial base uses aventurine glass, which is a deep, dark, navy blue gloss translucent glass that is laid down and then impregnated with metallic flakes to create this image of the endless cosmos behind the moon itself. The watch features the characteristic Endeavor case, which is remarkably fluid, and fluid is the word, as it seems to curve and stretch and arc in every direction. You can see that the bezel expands at 6 and 12 o'clock. It's concave throughout its entire profile. The case band is hollowed out and hand finished. This can only be achieved by first machining the cases and then hand finishing them. That's how Moser gets this incredible depth. Now, when you flip the watch over, you can see the movement is something special. Twin mainspring barrels, rated 7-day. In fact, it'll run for almost 9. Solid gold escapement for low friction, as well as improved power reserve. Handmade overcoil hairspring, 18K beat rate, and free sprung with a full bridge for shock tolerance. You can see there's a case back power reserve indicator. So this is actually a triple complication with the power reserve indicator, the moon phase, and then that 24-hour indicator. The watch does feature movement components that are designed to evoke pocket watches. You can see there's a swan's neck style click and click spring, evoking the 19th century era of Moser watches. The bridges, though not a true 3/4 because they're split in the center for ease of service, they do look like a 3/4, and that's the idea. They have lovely double crested Cote de Genève, and then you have the two mainspring barrels pivoting inside jewels set into golden chaton fixed by black polished screws, and that's an element from the pocket watch era when jewels were rarely pressed directly into bridges and plates, rather set in precision chaton, which were then fixed by screws into the bridges and plates. You can see this is one of 50, features a simple pin buckle, very comfortable. You can see that one of the ergonomic assets of this watch and all the Endeavors is that the case back itself is cambered. So you can see that crystal arcs around the edge of your wrist. The lugs are short, stubby, and even on my wrist of 16 centimeters, though it's a 42, it wears nicely. It doesn't seem ungainly for a dress watch to be this large. It fits like a glove, and it's a wonderful way to get into independent horology, as Moser makes only about 1,500 watches a year. And unlike a lot of independents, there's no flakiness to the company or the products. They run as steadily as Omegas and Rolexes, and they're just as serviceable. Taking a look at an earlier era of Moser. Moser was revived as a brand back in 2005, and a dental implant magnate poured a ton of money into building up the manufacture early on. So right here you can see a model called the Monard. The original models were the Mayu, the Nomad, the Monard, and the Perpetual. And you can see the watch has a lot of the elements that would later become associated with the MELB or Edouard Mélon era of Moser. You can see the cases machined and hand-finished in profile. You can see the concave bezel profile, the inverse conical crown, the minimalist dials. But you can see there is more going on this dial. Now, the watch is 41 millimeters in platinum, so it's hefty and substantial. It has an anthracite metallic sunburst dial. And again, we have one of these Streller complications in that the date is both huge and bidirectionally settable. You can see I could set the date with the quick set in both directions. You can also see there are actually two discs overlapping, and that's most easily seen between 31 and 1. In order to get this giant date, you need to have two superimposed discs under the dial, otherwise the watch face would be colossal. So not only is it bidirectionally adjustable, and not only does it switch instantaneously at midnight, and not only can you not accidentally damage it by adjusting the date at midnight, but it is a very brilliant system designed to give you maximum legibility, and all of the complexity is hidden beneath the dial. So you can see the case back very similar to what we just saw on the Endeavor Perpetual Moon. The main difference here is that, well, we have the case back power reserve, we have the 7-day rated 9-day actual power reserve, we have the same escapement in 14 karat gold, the overcoil hairspring, free sprung with a full balance bridge, and the pocket watch cues. The only real difference here is that at 41 millimeters and only 11 millimeters thick, this is a more compact watch on the wrist. It feels heavier than the bigger watch because platinum is so dense, but you can easily see that if your wrist is a little bit smaller than mine, you might want to go with this kind of Moser case. It is more compact, and you can easily see down the barrel that these lugs are nowhere near the edge of my wrist. It fits flush. It'll definitely slide underneath the cuff. This is a classical dress watch in every regard, and a very special timepiece. Also, I want to highlight the strap we've put it on, which is absolutely gorgeous, and as you can see, it is alligator leather on both sides with a contrasting stitch. Okay, we're heading to the Vallée de Joux, and we are discussing a watch that was made from about 2005 to 2012. This was the latest in a long series of JLC calendar wristwatches dating back to at least the 1930s and the caliber 412, and then the late 1940s and the Powermatic caliber, a combination of either power reserve watches and calendar watches, or one or the other, has been in the JLC catalog since at least the 1930s. This watch combined the two. The master calendar, 40 millimeters in rose gold, combined the traditional JLC automatic power reserve with the calendar complication and a moon phase for good measure. Now, I like this because I get aperture style calendar. You can see that there is a lunette style radial date indicator, and then I get the day and I get the month in apertures. This is all loomed, so it is a surprisingly versatile watch. It's got the power reserve and a wonderful cruciform symmetry, so you can split the dial from top to bottom and also side to side, and there's a nice balance to it. If you take a look, you can see that the hands are half frosted for better contrast against the sunburst silver dial base. Then when you turn it over, you realize this was back in the day when JLC cut absolutely no corners. You've got a 22 karat mass, not the tungsten with a rose gold plate that's currently used in the year 2021. A lot to love about this watch. The 889 base here has been upgraded with unidirectional winding, ceramic rotor bearings, and a free-sprung balance for durability. JLC still uses its fired blue screws. That's something they've done consistently since the late 80s. Their screws are always fired blue in a kiln. They're never chemically dyed. Throw the watch on the wrist and you'll note it does give you a full-to-point clasp, as JLC was not stingy with the clasps back then. Today it seems many of their watches, even complications, even in precious metal, come with pin buckles for cost considerations. Well, not here. This is a rich and iconic JLC duality. The power reserve and the calendar. No longer separate model lines. One watch, and 40 millimeters is not too large. It's got a little bit of a sports watch case profile to it because this case was used in the master compressor line. So it's chunkier than a standard dress watch, but it is not lacking in grace, and you can really see that well. It is low enough to fit underneath the cuff. A very special timepiece. If you want a core JLC watch, I used to tell people get a Memovox or get a Reverso, but truth be told, getting a power reserve or a calendar is just as valid. Now, speaking of watches of significance, when F.P. Journe started building his first line sport Sontograph in 2011, he realized there was a need for an automatic. If you're going to do a sports watch, you need automatic winding. So in 2012, the all-aluminum Line Sport Octasport came out, and that's exactly what we have here. This watch was only made from 2012 to 2014 because the all-aluminum case construction and bracelet construction proved to be a headache for Journe, who makes cases and bracelets in-house. So for the sake of streamlining production, he went to titanium starting in 2014, which means these earlier watches are not just scarcer, they're also very different in appearance. They're not the dark gray of the aluminum, or I should say of the titanium. The aluminum is a lovely silver satin, so it's brighter in appearance. It's also considerably lighter. Even in the hand, you can tell it's lighter than the titanium. Now, the watch includes a aluminum movement. That's still used on the Line Sport watches, but this watch has that continuity from the inside to the outside and back, in which the watch, bracelet, clasp, and the movement are all aluminum. You can see automatic winding, 5-day power reserve, free sprung for durability. It features a unique sort of anthracite coating on the aluminum surfaces, and then a rotor that's only included on these Line Sport automatics. The dial has a lot going on. You can see it is a matte ruthenium, and then it has the Journe biomorphic tapered hands, as well as the Journe font for the numerals. But if you look closely, you can see that the numerals are actually three-dimensional. They have length and width and height, so they actually look 3D at night when the watch is loomed. Smoked sapphire for the small seconds down at 6 o'clock will quickly demonstrate that the watch includes a AM/PM indicator, or a day-night indicator. You can see it changes from red at night to silver during the day. There is a power reserve indicator. As with the Mosers, this one will run a little bit longer than advertised. It's advertised as a 120-hour chronometric power reserve, but it'll run for about 160 hours. You've got a double-digit date with a quick set and red on silver print. And we'll do a loom shot because I've already teased you, so I have to deliver. And we're back with the Line Sport Octasport. You can really see that those numerals have height above the dial. They're not just printed features. They are applique blocks of solid luminova. All Two little gems in rose gold right here. This would be an awesome pairing. If you just wanted to buy one Journe watch, either of these. If you wanted to have one core Journe watch and something a little bit more out there, then you would buy them together. Here we have a Resonance 2, which is the Resonance 1 1212 dial. One moment. There you go. Which is the Resonance 1 1212 symmetrical dial, but with the rose gold movement that came in the Resonance 2 starting in mid-2004. So this is a Resonance chronometer. Resonance Boutique Edition, which means you have the black dial, the red gold case, 40 millimeters. It's only available through Journe boutiques and Espace. Now, of course, it does feature the resonance chronometer concept, whereby you have two barrels, two drivetrains, two escapements, two balances, and there's no physical coupling between them. Rather, the emanations, the frictional losses from the escapements and the balance action radiate out and cause the balances to synchronize the way metronomes or pendulums will synchronize if placed in proximity. The idea being that if one of them is disrupted and either runs fast or runs slow, the other one, through a virtuous cycle, will resynchronize and eventually slow down the racing movement or speed up the slowed movement. Now, because it does take about 7 to 10 minutes for the resonance phenomenon to couple the two sides non-mechanically, you often wind up with the seconds hand out of sync. So you have a flyback mechanism down here at 4 o'clock, so once they are resonating, you can synchronize the seconds hand. It is a dual time watch. You can set the two times separately, and then there's a power reserve, because this is one of the chronometer series from FP Journe. The power reserve moves backwards, so when fully wound, it indicates 0. On the reverse side, you can see that the case is rose gold, and so is the movement. Beautifully finished with black polished screws, Côte de Genève, engine turning on the base plate, and outstanding anglage. You can really appreciate that not only is this movement made of gold, but FP Journe has the ambition to try to finish gold the way a regular manufacturer would finish brass. Not easy to do. That the results look this good is a testament to the time and effort and money he has put into it. I'll also mention Journe makes cases, dials, clasps, bracelet, buckles, and movements. So when you buy an FP Journe watch, you're not getting an in-house movement. And I'll admit, even with Moser, they don't make their dials, they don't make their bracelets and clasps, they don't make their cases, but they make great movements. Journe makes the movement and everything else. Fully invested in a vertical manufacturer. That's part of the integrity you get with a Journe watch. Now here we have a model that launched in 2010. They made 69 in platinum and 68, as you see right here, in rose gold. This is officially the second of the Vagabondage series, and the name effectively means to sort of wander or amble around, and that was the name Journe coined with the original, which used a tonneau-shaped movement he'd have originally designed for a Cartier Tour 2 jump hour that never came to pass. He bought back the right to the movement from Cartier, put it in the Vagabondage 1, but because that movement wasn't up to his standards chronometry-wise, he didn't put his name on the dial of that first Vagabondage. Now, this watch, of course, features a purpose-built movement that does achieve outstanding chronometry, but he stuck with the tradition of not putting a name on the dial. Also, a change here is that we have both jumping minutes and jumping hours. You can see there's a smoked sapphire surrounding a bridge that looks symmetrical at first glance, but then you look at it and you realize it's actually not symmetrical. What it is beautifully made. You have rose gold frames inside a set of steel apertures that are held in place by a combination of black polished screws and anchor pivots. Then you have a power reserve indicator up at the top. Turn it all over. The movement is rose gold to match the case, and as you can see, it is free sprung, as Journe is wont to do. There were 68 of these made, so remember, they made 69 in platinum and they made 68 in rose gold, so the rose gold is by 1 unit the scarcer of the two. It's also a very easy watch to wear. It's about 38 millimeters wide by 8 millimeters thick by just over 45 millimeters lug to lug. It has a clasp, which is something rarely seen on Journe watches and thus very special. When you throw it on the wrist, you can see this is probably the most compact non-38 millimeter round case Journe available. Other than maybe a Ladies Elegant 40, this is superb. A unisex option, an option that'll fit underneath the cuff, a watch for those who prefer a little bit more discretion perhaps, and the ability to wear a dress watch underneath a dress sleeve. It's all of those things, and it is my personal favorite of the 3 Vagabondage models. I just like the dial better. I like the combination of the jump hour and the jumping minutes. Grubel Forsey launched this watch back in 2018, and I think it was maybe a little bit too cerebral for the market. This is the Grubel Forsey Differentiel d'Égalité. Now, the timepiece, as you can see, is 44 millimeters in white gold, a 33-piece limited edition, and all of the action is in the spherical differential, which is hidden underneath the massive bridges. But it has a spring that operates much like the remontoir on a journe tourbillon or a journe chronometer optimum, and each second it reinforces the energy supply heading to the escapement. So the barrels never directly drive the escapement. There is that 1 second spring buffer built into the differential that ensures the force throughout the runtime, the full 60-hour power reserve. Throughout the 60-hour power reserve of this watch, the force applying to the balance wheel, acting on the escapement, is always the same. Usually, watches will lose a certain measure of force to the escapement as the barrels wind down. Thanks to this differential, there is no loss of energy or force to the escapement for 60 hours. Now you can see there is a constant seconds display underneath a deadbeat second system. There's also a remarkably involved zero reset hacking second system. You can see the steel components on the reverse side mirror finished with bevels a mile wide on their side. And so when you pull the crown, you can see that it zeroes out the seconds display. There are two. There's the constant seconds and there's the deadbeat second. And the deadbeat second system is tied to the differential. So each second that the differential is topped off by the two barrels, it jumps the seconds hand. I'll show you that zero reset one more time. There's also a power reserve indicator. And because this is Grubel Forsey, we're getting COSC no object finish. You can see that the balance itself is continuously rounded and black polished. There's an overcoil hairspring. It's free sprung, adjusted in 6 positions. Grubel Forsey is about aesthetics, yes, but also chronometry. All of their innovations are geared towards making the watches more accurate. And that goes back to their 2013 win in the Concours de Chronometrie with the 30-degree double tourbillon. This watch is in that tradition, a watch that's designed to be visually spectacular, but ultimately also to tell time better. You can see Grubel Forsey case design is remarkably intricate, with these concave mirror-polished lugs, vertical satin finish in the mid-case, polished case back and bezel, and then you can see the dial with a lovely wire brush frosting on German silver bridges, that nickel copper zinc material that's then rhodium plated here, so it doesn't have the golden hue of a longa, but it's the same material used in a longa. And then on the reverse side, you can see all this text pertains to the construction philosophy at Grubel Forsey, everything that goes into their philosophy of manufacturing. And the watch is very substantial. It has a full deploying clasp. Remember, this is Grubel Forsey's idea of chronometry. This is how it's achieved with a constant force escapement. Truly spectacular. The movement is 9.9 millimeters thick, which means you don't just stare at this movement, you stare down into it and through it. That said, I believe Romain Gauthier takes the cake for movement depth. This is the Logical One, 43 millimeters in white gold. It has a Grand Faux enamel dial for your hours and minutes and a Grand Faux enamel dial for your seconds. Free sprung, you can see it uses Romain Gauthier's own free-sprung balance design, his own wheels in the drivetrain, and then there is a chain system that is basically a fusee constant force device. So for 46 hours, you get constant force to the escapement. This is a very different take than the differential with a remontoir spring used by Grubel Forsey. We have a snail cam, and then we have a wheel that's connected to the barrel. There are 29 individual jewels sitting inside the chain, and I'll try to show you this to best advantage, but you can see that the chain is actually packed with jewels that act as rollers to reduce friction. You wind the watch by pressing the button at 9 o'clock. You set the watch using the crown that's up at 2 o'clock, and you can see that every bridge has bevels a mile wide on its edge, and then the structure that anchors the fusee as well as the barrel, it's completely black polished on its center. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 interior angles where sharp bevels meet. That's more than you'll find in a fistful of Vacheron movements with the Geneva hallmark. Turn it all over and you can see the barrel is open, so you can actually gauge the effective power reserve by how tightly coiled the mainspring is, but there is also a conventional power reserve indicator. Again, so many interior angles, frosted bridges and plates, satination on the half bridge for the power reserve indicator, black polish everywhere. You can see the surface is turning black as I angle the watch. Those are all black polished. Philippe Dufour does no better, and Philippe Dufour, in fact, was the inspiration for these mile-wide hand bevels that you see on Romain Gaultier watches. Throw it on the wrist, and you can see it's a big watch, but it's intricately finished outside as well as inside. It's super striking with gilded bridges and plates. There's the silver of the steel components, and then you can see the warm white gold of the case with the grand faux enamel of the dials. Guys, this is as good as it gets from independent brands, and Romain Gaultier only making 40 to 60 watches a year. That's what happens when you finish your watch like this. Volume never happens. Quality, though, assured. Romain Gaultier has investment from Chanel, and he does engineering work for Chanel watches. So not only is this watch rare, but the company behind it is on a firm financial footing into the future. Guys, reach out to me directly. If you see something you like, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.